Paratruth. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Paratruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans and 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and United Public Radio Network. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
We hope you're all having a wonderful end to your summer. I can't believe it's wrapping up already. It's actually been pretty cool over here in Ohio, like 60s, which is weird for August.
Which is funny because we've been higher.
That's weird. It's very weird.
We've been kind of up and down. So
I know. So we've been in the 70s, like high 70s the last 3 days, but then we're dropping back into the mid to low 60s starting Thursday. So I don't know. I think fall's pretty much just like, yeah, I'm bored and I'm coming to kick your door in.
Spooky season right around the corner.
Yeah, which, as long as spooky season is around, I don't mind it being cool because you can't have hot weather and enjoy, it's like Christmas in the Bahamas. It don't make sense. Unless you're in the Bahamas, you grew up there, then maybe it doesn't.
That makes a little
But anyway, as you guys may remember, last week we had mentioned we were talking about Atlantis this week, a short continuation of our little series here. Now, Atlantis is one of the greatest mysteries of human history. The questions are just, there are tons of questions about Atlantis, scientists, just everyday investigators, people who simply are interested in the idea or, the reality of Atlantis. It just raises so many questions, such as, was it an advanced civilization swallowed by the sea, or is it just a myth that Plato made up to teach a lesson? We have all these different questions, and whether or not we have answers, well, we're about to find out. So get ready, grab yourself a drink or a snack, or get a drink and a snack. Why not? Let's live a little, because we are about to delve into the deep history of the myth, lore, and possible truths of Atlantis. Now, it sounds like you're about to say something, but before you do, I was going to say, what are your initial pre-notions of Atlantis? What did you know or learn when you were growing up?
I mean, just pop culture alone. There was a video game that I used to play that the theme was time travel, and in the third game of the series, you went back to Atlantis, El Dorado, and Shangri-La, all of which are not factual in history that these civilizations existed, other than depictions of them from third parties, basically. Right. And I mean, you just mentioned Plato is the one for Atlantis, but I've always kind of felt it was real, but without, there's no physical proof per se, and we'll get into it a little bit. One of them being, the ruins that they find in the ocean, but I can kind of touch on that as we get into the history, because I found out something recently that I didn't know.
Okay. It's Atlantis has been one of those things that has obviously been discussed pretty much our entire lives. Literally our entire lives, and so much longer than that. But it's something that you and I have discussed over and over and over again throughout the years. And each and every day, almost every day, I see something online about Atlantis and lost civilization, whether it's a documentary or it's just simply questions on Reddit or on some paranormal forum, and the simple truth is, just as we know, there's so much of our sea unexplored. Like there is more of our sea, of our oceans that we do not know about um, than we do of space, which is kind of wild, right? And so, with that said, we see all these civilizations that have been drowned out by the ocean. Uh, when the waters rise, it claims everything. And we know that Earth is really good at claiming itself back. It takes over cities, it takes over structures that have been abandoned. It's not something that's, waits around to do it either. It's done within a month or two. Everything turns green or it gets washed away.
Yeah.
And of course, we keep seeing new finds, like you said, new archaeological finds on various places. And some of these places, we don't even know what they are. Like there are structures at the bottom of the ocean, statues of people and various types of figures and animals. And where exactly they came from or who they belong to, nobody knows. But it's clear that there was some sort of structure, some sort of maybe city-like thing that was there once upon a time that either fell into the ocean or was, maybe it was engulfed during the Great Flood or during a tsunami of some sort. But when it comes to the origins of Atlantis itself, or at least the story of Atlantis, we have to date back to Plato's dialogues. They're written around 360 BC in particular, and manuscripts themselves describe Atlantis as a powerful empire located west of the Pillars of Hercules that sank into the sea after a natural disaster of earthquakes and floods. This was an event recorded by Egyptian priests to the Athenian statesman Solon or Solon?
I believe it's pronounced Solon.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, the island itself was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, featuring a central city with a temple to Poseidon. And surrounded by that was a plain, basically crisscrossed by concentric rings of canals and ditches and fed by mountain streams and artificial waterways. Now, the island was incredibly wealthy, as we've heard over, centuries at this point, and basically possessed timber, abundant resources, and precious metals like oracle, or kelk, I think is how that's pronounced. But its people also grew corrupt, angering the gods and leading to their destruction and the island's sinking. And one thing that I do want to mention, like he does give a bit of a kind of a map to where this should be located, right? He gives this kind of an area in which it was surrounded by cities and mountains, things like that. Like so many times we have people searching the depths of the ocean, the deep depths. But we have to remember that if that were the case, and these mountains that also were feeding these streams into Atlantis, they would have to be engulfed too or be torn down. And so we know it was by earthquake and flood that this supposedly disappeared. And what's really interesting to me is that according to scripture, if anybody knows, and it's not just in the Bible, it's recorded history of the Great Flood. There's evidence surrounding us everywhere. Basically, when it happens, not only is it raining, but the earth springs up springs of water that help to engulf it, which means there are these cracks in the earth that formed basically an earthquake, right? In which water can spewing up and out. So we hear earthquakes and floods in the Bible, and here's this city. We know those floods are sent to destroy wicked things God didn't like, things that were troubling him because the world or humanity in particular was growing wicked. So I do find that very interesting that, again, the story of Atlantis does line up, at least in terms of its fallen state.
The backstory, right?
Yeah. It kind of lines up. Now, where exactly it's located is the big question, because we have so many questions about so many things. Like, where's the Garden of Eden? Where did that exist? And we have a map to that as well, and yet we have trouble pinpointing it.
Right, we still can't place it. Yeah,
right.
And that's what baffles me about all of this too. Is even though we have a roadmap, there's so many different locations that supposedly are theories of where it's located.
Well, and that's just the thing. It's like, so right now we're describing this based on Plato's original
manuscripts,
stories, manuscripts, right? But over the years, it's kind of like, as we talked about telephone, just like any myth or legend, it grows and it grows because when it's told from one person to the next, things change or things are added, things are taken away.
Mm.
And so instead of just focusing strictly on Plato's manuscripts, we're also trying to cross-reference it with other possible stories that represent Atlantis as well. And so now you're getting this mixed bag of various explanations of where it could have been located, which naturally has scientists and explorers alike dotted all over the map trying to find it. And you will hear this. Some people say Atlantis is way up north. Some will say it's way down south. Some will say it's at the equator. Some will say, it's off the coast of the United States. While others say, oh, no, it's over, near Sicily. There's just so many different places. And it's all because people are interpreting the evidence that they have differently.
Yeah. And that's why I hate the game telephone.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I found fascinating is that this actually kind of got buried and then re-emerged during the Renaissance in Europe. The Critias was largely unknown in the Latin West during the Middle Ages and only fully emerged with the arrival of the Byzantine scholars and Greek manuscripts during the Renaissance. So were these stories buried? Was it just, countries conquering each other and manuscripts being misplaced and then all of a sudden found or buried, whatever?
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be either of those. It also could be they destroyed the original manuscripts of where this exact location was and they tried to memorize it, but memory gets foggy after so long. Or as people write it down, it's changed. Again, similar to telephone, you pass the manuscripts on from one person to the next. They recopy it and they change things here and there a little bit. Not to be facetious or make it, unrecognizable and hard to find, but because people have different ways of describing things. It's like, why is there, I'm going to go back to the Bible. Why are there 4 gospels telling the same story 4 times over? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell a story slightly different. But when you take a step back and look at it as a whole, you realize that they're all the same exact story. It's just the author's personality,
perspective,
the perspective of how things and shows like how or why things had changed in certain areas. And a lot of those changes are very small. And I think that's the same thing here with Atlantis. If it did exist, the changes that we're seeing today that we don't know are changes are actually very small compared to the originals. But because there's so many, it's growing them exponentially. And so we've lost where its location actually was or is, I should say, if it's still there.
Yeah. So we'll get into the different locations. The one thing I didn't find, and maybe it's in the areas that are described, but it didn't say Bermuda. Like we talked about last week with the Bermuda Triangle, they claim that maybe Atlantis is the responsible party for the Bermuda Triangle having these anomalies.
Right.
So the first one is the more ancient, like as we go, it's getting closer and closer to history than we remember. But Santorini, there was an eruption in Santorini, and the theory proposes that Minoan eruption of Thera, or now known as Santorini, around 1600 BCE, which destroyed a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization at Akrotiri. Again, these names are going to kill us today, I think. With tsunamis and ash inspired the myth of Atlantis. Proponents suggest the caldera shape with its submerged central island and ring of surrounding land and resembles Plato's description of Atlantis, which makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. However, the theory faces significant challenges, including inconsistencies with Plato's timeline and location of Atlantis, and evidence that the Minoan culture was not entirely destroyed, but rather declined over time. Crete, I've heard this theory a couple of times. The theory linking Crete to the lost city of Atlantis is based on the idea that Plato's description of Atlantis might have been inspired by the Minoan civilization, which flourished on Crete thousands of years ago. While Crete didn't sink into the sea, as described in the Atlantis myth, the Minoan civilization did experience a catastrophic end, possibly due to the eruption of Thera volcano, which is close to Crete. And in that video game that I was telling you about, it kind of placed it somewhere in between Manoa and Crete.
Right.
Now we're getting towards closer to our neck of the woods, in a sense. The Azores or Canary Islands. Both the Azores and the Canary Islands have been suggested as possible locations for the lost city of Atlantis, which, with theories focusing on underwater structures like the submerged mountain Los Atlantes near the Canary Islands and alleged ancient megalithic constructions and cart ruts on the Azores. While these locations are volcanically formed islands in the Atlantic, as described by Plato, neither site has conclusive archaeological and geological evidence to suggest the existence of Atlantis, with many scholars believing Plato's account to be a philosophical allegory rather than a literal historical record. Now, one thing I will say before we move a little bit further is I saw an article recently that stated that there's been evidence to be found that the Greeks had a way of breathing underwater with reeds. Okay. And that's how a lot of these ruins that you see in the ocean were built. They built these things either in the ocean or brought them down and just used basically a snorkel to breathe underwater.
I mean, that's very possible. I mean, to this day, people still do that using reeds to breathe.
Right.
That was the original way to snorkel. Whether or not it's hard to say, because like they would have had to have some sort of, in this case, especially considering it's the sea. So we're talking about salt water here, an ability. It would have to have the ability to see as well, which means they would have had to form some sort of goggles, right? Basically, they would have had to form a ton of stuff in order to be able to stay down at the bottom, to weight themselves down, to be able to use chisel or whatever other thing that they use down there. And whether or not the formations or the rocks that they used or whatever other building materials that they used were already there to begin with, or they had to move them from the land into the sea to build it. There's a lot of technical issues here, and it kind of reminds me back to like Egypt. Like how did they build the pyramids, right?
Right.
And so there's this really strong belief, though, that Atlantis was very unique in its ability to be technologically advanced among all of the other civilizations, right? It stood out as being technologically advanced, and people will, they'll give credence to the possibility of alien help, extraterrestrial help, to provide them with opportunities to build new devices to do this kind of stuff. And whether or not that's true is, neither here nor there. There's no way to prove that currently. But if they really were so advanced, and even more advanced, and as some will say, more advanced than our current society, modern history, then there's definitely plenty of opportunities for them to actually go underwater and build it. But the big question is, if they did that, like if they went underwater to build this city and these this what is now ruins, why do it at all? Like, why build something that no one can see underwater? Unless it was some way of like praising a god or something, or some sort of worship.
Yeah, it would be for praising Poseidon in Greek mythology, at least. So yes, you're not wrong there. But yeah, there's so many more questions that rise up when we talk about
every time, man. Every time.
Right. What would be the motivation of ancient civilizations to do the things that they did? I'm still looking for motivations for some of the stuff we do in this day and age.
I'm
So
trying to find motivations of things I do in this day and age. Like, why did I do that? I don't even know what.
all right, we got two more locations here, and the last one will make a lot of sense to me as to the location, but we'll get into it. All right, so the last two areas is the Caribbean Bahamas, which does link to the Bermuda Triangle because that's in that region.
Mm-hmm.
It just does not bring up Bermuda as the actual area. Bimini Road and Edgar Casey's prophecies. The Bimini Road is an underwater geological feature off the coast of Bimini, Bahamas, consisting of large rectangular limestone blocks that resemble a road or wall. Its discovery in 1968 coincided with a prophecy from psychic Edgar Casey that a portion of Atlantis would be revealed near Bimini around that time, leading to speculation that the formation is an ancient ruin of the lost city. While some geologists suggest the blocks are a natural formation of beach rock, which makes sense to me, others believe their arrangement indicates human construction, but consensus remains elusive. Yeah. So that's part of our issue here with Atlantis as well, is the constant arguments from scientific and archaeological digs, whether that's ocean or whatever, that are conflicting, which causes people to believe that Atlantis isn't real at all. We're just arguing about this.
Right. And I don't know if you've ever, some of you actually probably have seen it, but if you've seen the road, like pictures of this road that Justin was just talking about, it does look like something that should be man-made because it is very uniform, perfect blocks. These are 90-degree angles all around. So that is indeed very interesting because we don't typically see that in nature. Things tend to be a little more rounded, especially when they're in the water. It slowly erodes things away, rocks away. So the fact that this particular area is built the way that it is does seem very suspicious. But again, there has been, as Justin said, scientific support in which these things could very well be natural elements to our Earth. And I can't remember exactly how they said it would happen, but it's something that is very unique within the water systems in particular. So it's hard to say whether something is man-made or natural without actually being there or at least being able to tell, like using various sonars as to what type of chisels or tools are used on them. Through various pictures or whatever that they
could be due to tectonic plate changes too.
I mean, it could be, but even that's kind of weird because, like, you look at these photos and it looks like a brick street.
It's all weird.
Like if you guys know what a brick street looks like, there's a lot here in Cleveland. That's what it looks like, and it's just not normal for the Earth to like break up. I don't know. I was about to say the Earth to break up Earth. I guess now I can say break up itself, but that also doesn't make. It's just weird. Okay. Yeah. It's just weird. I've had a long day, guys. Sorry.
All right. The last theory here is that Atlantis is actually in Antarctica. And it posits that the legendary city of Atlantis was located on what is now Antarctica, which was once a temperate continent before its catastrophic shift to the polar regions and subsequent burial under ice. This popular fringe theory largely popularized in the 1990s, which is interesting that I've never heard it because that was around the time that I was getting interested in this stuff. Is inspired by Charles Hapgood's controversial Earth's shifting crust theory and is not supported by scientific evidence, as plate tectonics explains continental movements over much larger geological timescales. But it does make sense to me because we still don't know what Antarctica was before it became Antarctica. And although it says that Atlantis fell into the ocean, it being frozen over would make you think that it went into the ocean because there's no existence of it anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's hard to say. And again, like even with Antarctica, I mean I know there's been sonar uses to kind of decipher how deep the ice actually extends into the earth.
And they've found pyramids down there too.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy. And it's pretty deep, like I remember listening to a podcast about exploration. And I believe it was on Ernest. Was it Ernest Shackleton in this case? I want to say it was. I could be wrong. But basically, it was early days of exploring the South Pole, or trying to reach the South Pole. And they were using horses to move stuff, which, on ice and snow, you don't use horses because there's a lot of pressure individually pressed into the earth with the hooves. You're supposed to use like sleds and use sled dogs and stuff, something
right.
And so these animals, these horses, they'd be running, galloping through Antarctica, trying to get to the South Pole, and then all of a sudden the horse would just disappear into a hole, and there was no end. Like they just disappeared, and we see that even now today with sinkholes. People who just fall into a sinkhole, you look down, they're gone. There's nothing there. It's tremendous just how deep the Earth goes and how deep this ice goes. So who knows if that is the case, it may be miles below the surface. And in that case, we probably never reach it anyway. On top of it, though, I do want to say, like, there was a time when all the continents were located. They're all central in one giant mass land, right? And due to the plate shift of the Earth, the continents slowly moved apart. So it's very possible that Atlantis was indeed at one point in a relatively tropical area and then slowly moved south into Antarctica. And, that's how it ended up freezing and potentially being buried by ice and snow. Another thing that I actually wanted to mention, I'm going to jump back a little bit to when you're talking about Santorini. The description of Atlantis basically being a central island and having a ring surrounding the land. Anybody know what Pompeii looks like? Because there is speculation that Atlantis is indeed Pompeii. There hasn't been enough evidence to prove it, but it is eerily similar in terms of the description of how it looks.
Well, I know Shelley's been to Pompeii, so we'll have to ask her. But Pompeii didn't sink at all, right?
Well,
it's covered in lava, right?
As far as we know. I mean, basically, like, what was the what was the volcano? Vesuvius in 79 AD. It basically sent out a nasty ash cloud that froze people in time. I would have no doubt that there was some flooding at the time as well, because it would have created tsunamis for sure. Just the shock alone. But yeah, there's so many places that just look very similar to this island with a ring around it. And there's places down, like in India, there's places near, within the Bermuda, in which is like an island within an island within an island. And you just, it's just a constant ring. So again, though, like you said, like where this place could be or what it actually looks like, we don't really know. And there's so many places that look similar that we can constantly just search and never find evidence. And it's like, at what point do you say that this particular place is indeed Atlantis? I mean, there's so many civilizations that have been buried by time.
Right. Well, and that raises the question, were these real locations linked to Plato's story or retrofitted to the theories which humans do time and time again to prove their theory is that, well, it says in the story, so by this evidence, this is where this whatever is.
Right.
All right. Why don't you go over the archaeological evidence?
Okay. So when it comes to the archaeological evidence, there are things for and against. Now, archaeological discoveries, in particular, sunken cities and lost civilizations, uh, have been kind of. There's been a lot. Okay, there's been quite a few cities that have sunk into the oceans, to say the least. And there's plenty that are currently sinking, and not only into the oceans, but in our own backyard. What is it? Is it South Dakota, or where's that one city that's currently sinking into a lake?
That's Devil's Lake.
Devil's Lake.
The reason that it's called Devil's Lake is the city had already been consumed by the lake, and they claim that the devil did it.
Got it. But yeah, but we have things like that. Like the earth is constantly consuming the land. The water does not want to stay where it is, right? But anyway, with some of these archaeological discoveries, we have first and foremost Pavlopetri, which is Greece. It's the oldest known submerged city in the world, about 5,000 years old in particular, Bronze Age town off the coast of Greece, which remains remarkably intact. Then we have Thonis Hercules. Yes.
Heracleon.
My goodness gracious. And Canopus, which is in Egypt. Now, these important ancient Egyptian ports in the Nile Delta sank due to seismic activity and rising sea levels, with many intact statues and temples that have been discovered. Another one is Outlet Yam, which is in Israel. And this is, again, another ancient, in this case, Neolithic village swallowed by the Mediterranean Sea. Now, its remains are an important source for understanding early human settlements. But again, it just tells us that there are plenty of places that get sunk or gobbled up, right, by the oceans. And then, of course, we have, I only want to say Bay, but that's not entirely accurate. Baie, maybe, which is in Italy. And this is a Roman resort town, which is now underwater due to, again, geological uplift and subsidence in the region, with remains of villas and nymphium of Emperor Claudius. And the list keeps going on. Dwarka of India, an ancient city found in the Gulf of Cambay, featuring pillars, city grids, and ancient artifacts, adding again to the mystery of its origin and age. And then Lion City in China, also known as Xicheng. This ancient city in particular was artificially submerged to create a reservoir and is now a popular diving site. And then we have Port Royal in Jamaica, a Caribbean pirate city that sank in an earthquake in 1692, offering a glimpse into the piratical era. Now, there are various reasons, again, as to why these places sunk and why various cities, towns, countries even, begin to sink. One, of course, is geological possibilities, the tectonic shifts along our Earth, tsunamis, which we have seen plenty of over the last 15 years, basically, which just happened not too long ago due to an earthquake. Rising sea levels. Again, we're talking about climate change. But then there's this lack of direct evidence connecting anything to Atlantis. You see, people don't know what exactly was at Atlantis. We have a small description of what it should be or what it could have been, but we don't have any examples of what had existed at any given time. So if we were even to find Atlantis without having a name that says this is the city of Atlantis, and we can carbon date it to being around the time that Atlantis would have existed, we simply don't have proof that it is indeed Atlantis. On top of that, there is, of course, plenty of scientific skepticism. I don't think even just scientific skepticism. I think it's just a natural skepticism among people everywhere, because Atlantis, again, is one of those things that has been told to us as a tale since we're infants, basically, right? We all heard of Atlantis at some point or another, at least most of us have. And it has often been described as being a myth and has been used in literature and pop culture as a myth, as this place that is kind of like a fairy tale existence here among the earth, a place that is unlike any other place in the world. And so with that, there's just skepticism as to whether or not Atlantis itself ever really truly existed, because we have yet to see any description of it, not only of Atlantis itself, but like in any other culture. Most cultures, they'll acknowledge another culture around them, or of some far away country or state due to its power and strength.
Oh, there's the tail.
Yep. Yeah. He's been up here the whole time, but he's just moving around now. But yet we've seen nothing here, right? There's just been no indication that Atlantis has existed ever.
Yeah.
And then, of course, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's only been like us all on the fringe area theorizing what this was.
Right. And yeah, so when it comes to, the fringe beliefs, the simple fact, or I should say, the simple fact that Atlantis as an advanced civilization or even an extraterrestrial linked society isn't really a fact. Like, it's just something that has to be speculation. Like, even nowadays, we've been seeing, more and more increases in UFOs, right? And we've talked about this many times here on this show. And yet we don't have significant 100% infallible proof that these UFOs are extraterrestrial in nature. All we know is that they're these interesting objects that are seen in the sky by our eyes, by our cameras. And that's it. So to say that Atlantis was indeed, this hypothetical major city above all the others that was advanced technologically and even linked through extraterrestrial societies, kind of just puts more of the skepticism, I think, on the plate. Because this thing, like, this city has so much surrounding it, so much pulled into it. It's like, this can't be real. It couldn't have existed.
Well, and yeah, I mean, literally the wording that you used, fringe belief, there's a huge difference between belief and scientific fact or evidence. So that really boils down to that Atlantis and culture and paranormal circles is kind of leading this belief system in Atlantis. And there's so much stuff in pop culture and film, literature. Like I mentioned, it was a PC video game, like Disney's Atlantis, Aquaman, that's the DC side, Namor, which was the Marvel side. It's bringing all of this back to the forefront of people's minds, and in that we are leading our theories, quote unquote, by pop culture. You've got also the esoteric traditions. Atlantis is theosophy, New Age, and psychic readings. Paranormal connections with advanced crystal technology, which in my mind, we have advanced crystal technology now. Yeah. It may not be the advanced crystal technology that the theories are talking about, but energy sources and psychic powers or abilities. And then it really brings the question, how modern conspiracy theories and spiritual movements link to Atlantis. And so what are your thoughts on that? Like, is this, because we have so many different conspiracy theories out there saying, there's stuff that's being suppressed and whatever. And it's not that I don't believe that certain things are being suppressed. But with the spiritual movement and conspiracy theories coming up into modern day and making it more prevalent that, Atlantis was real, we're just being told it wasn't, blah, blah, blah. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I mean, if for whatever reason that Plato wrote the initial story of Atlantis, I think at this point is insignificant, right? It exists in the minds of humanity because of the power that we poured into it, and it's like Pompeii, or I'm sorry, I'm thinking of something regarding Pompeii right now, but if Atlantis, um, or I think that Atlantis is kind of like this ideal world that I think people would want to live in themselves, right? A place that is at the peak of all of civilization, so highly advanced, so technically driven, so more or less perfect city of gold type of thing, right? We're talking like heaven on earth in a way in some cases. And because it's been made so extravagant over the years, I think there's just this misunderstanding or misideal of what it could have actually been, right? Like Atlantis, if it did exist, may not have been any more technologically advanced than any other civilization around the world. But because it disappeared, and we have this one particular story from Plato, I think people just pour into it and pour into it and pour into it, hoping that they'll be the one to find this giant treasure, right? That's what it is at this point. It's a treasure hunt. And whoever gets it gets all the spoiled and riches. But yeah, I mean, it's used in pop culture. It's used in film and in literature, and it's constantly added to in its ability to outdo the rest of the world. And then on top of that, like the idea of the advanced crystal technology, energy sources, all that stuff, that all comes back to the whole extraterrestrial thing. Mind you, in the beginning of the Bible, in particular Genesis 6, and we talk about the sons of God, in this case, angels coming down and bearing women, children. We talk about the Nephilim, right? These are heroes. These are giants. They were renowned. These are individuals that were capable of teaching civilizations the unknown stuff that we learn today. So many will argue that some of the things that we learned, like psychic abilities or using crystal technology, was taught to us by these angelic human hybrids. Some will say it's extraterrestrials, aliens that taught us that. But again, I've said it before, it's very possible that the Nephilim themselves are the aliens. These creatures, basically, that were able to create and use technology way so advanced, like, we're talking thousands and thousands of years in advance technology compared to what was in modern time during those days. And if that's the case, then, it's very possible that if Atlanta was indeed a real place and it was built as big as it was and had the technology that it did, then maybe there was something there helping them out. Like, how can a single type of human have that type of power and yet not exist, like cease to exist? There had to be a reason to their downfall. Like, even if Atlantis fell into the ocean, there should have been survivors. It wouldn't typically just happen overnight. Unless it did. And that goes back to my biblical statement at the beginning of the show.
Well, so you're saying more an ideology, if Atlantis was real, an ideology that it was a utopian, not that it actually was.
Right.
Well, and so not to add to the conspiracy theory, but in the game I was talking about, it really emphasized the extraterrestrial part, because it was a time travel game, but it was also, we've made contact with aliens or extraterrestrials because they warned us that this technology would be harmful. But that it was two warring races of extraterrestrials that destroyed Shangri-La, El Dorado, and Atlantis. They didn't go into other lost civilizations that have been supposedly advanced civilizations for their time, but it was really pushing that theory that it was extraterrestrials that caused the destruction.
Right. Well, and that's very possible as well. Like, and I think that's part of the problem is there's just so much speculation, that it has everybody spinning, and nobody knows which way to go, what to hold on to, because you start to develop a theory and you start following that theory, but then all of a sudden a new piece of evidence pops up. Instead of continuing on your journey, you take a fork in the road, and now you're searching for something possibly in somewhere completely different. And before you know it, you're just old and gray and on your deathbed, right?
Maybe you'll find out what happened to him.
Maybe you'll find out then. I don't know. Like there's so much speculation as to why Atlantis, if it existed, disappeared, and whether or not it was extraterrestrials that destroyed it, whether it was God that destroyed it, whether it was a natural Earth event that destroyed it. We will never know, or at least not I don't think anytime soon. I don't think in our lifetime, that's for sure. Atlantis is probably one of the most highly sought out civilizations ever. And it has yet to be found. But they keep finding other things, which I guess is kind of beneficial. We're learning about history, just not the history we want.
Well, then, that really boils down to, like, was Atlantis just, a cautionary tale of hubris and about the downfall of civilizations? Because, I mean, history will teach us time and again that civilizations will come and go. Mm-hmm. We should be learning lessons from history. There's possible parallels to today's society. Look at what's going on right now with climate change, the misuse of technology. The list goes on, and political changes that are constantly happening within our society. If Atlantis existed, and really we can just leave it up to you guys if it did or didn't. We'll kind of give our final thoughts about it. But what lessons should we take from it? Like, should we be looking more at how we are living today and kind of adjust? Because if Atlantis was destroyed because it was too advanced, say it was extraterrestrials, they felt that, or maybe Atlantis was an experimental city, let's say, by extraterrestrials, and it got too powerful because we somehow just figured out how to use the technology of the extraterrestrials against them. Do we need to kind of slow down in this society today? We've been through several ice ages on this earth. I shouldn't say we. The earth has been through several ice ages. So with climate change that where we're at right now, maybe we start preparing for a possible small ice age. What does that look like? We don't know. But I really want to hear you guys' thoughts on that too, because it's one of those things that we can just sit here, speculate all we want, but I would really love to hear other people's thoughts. So we did a poll before today's episode, and basically it was, do you believe Atlantis was real? There was yes, no, I don't know, or not sure, but I would love to speculate. And the majority was not sure, but I would love to speculate and hear the theories.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt it's fun to talk about.
Right.
Fun to think about. I think it would be cool if Atlantis did exist. Whether or not it existed to, on par of what we currently believe it to have been, that's a separate thing altogether. But I think if we did find a city named Atlantis, Um, I think, a lot of people would just it blow their minds. I think a lot of people would just lose it.
Well, I mean, the same thing can be said for if extraterrestrials actually made contact, because we're not, we've talked about this a lot with guests, and even just doing individual shows of just you and I, that it's not going to be the governments that give us this information.
Right.
It's going to be extraterrestrials that actually reach out to the populace. I think people would be losing their freaking minds about that too. Like,
yeah. No, 100%. And I've got friends who 1000% believe that, there's going to be a moment within the next year or so in which extraterrestrial life makes itself known on their own. And again, that's something we've talked about here on the show.
Yeah.
Since like last summer, basically. So it's really interesting. This is an interesting time that we're living in for sure, both in making modern history, but also in kind of subscribing to history itself. And the one thing that I notice is how, especially as an individual living in the US of A, how history repeats itself over and over again. And not saying that, any one country relives its own, history over and over, but it relives each other's history in many ways. And again, it reminds me of the scriptures. Like there's going to be rumors of wars, and there's going to be earthquakes and, disasters. And these are all going to be growing pains, things that make us think the end is coming, but the end isn't going to come. Because instead it's going to come like a thief in the night. Basically, we're not going to know what happens. And I think a lot of what we're witnessing today, like in this world, I think it's a setup to an extent to make us focus in on the scary things that are happening and make us think about our past and what needs to be changed instead of focusing on our futures. And even on more in particular, on our present tense moments, right? Like I think so many people, myself included, are so focused on the past or the future, we forget to live now. And, by all means, we can speculate about Atlantis as much as we want. But for those who are interested in securing it, finding it, like what is the benefit of that? I think is the question we need to ask. But also, what can we learn from it? What can we learn from the story of Atlantis? Like, at what point do we raise ourselves too high on a pedestal? There's like, forget the exact saying, but basically it's from a rapper named Lecrae, a Christian rapper, and he calls it a power trip. Somebody who becomes so full of themselves, so prideful, so involved in what they have that eventually they trip over their own power and they fall and they're humbled. And I think if anything comes to light here regarding Atlantis is that if it existed, became so big, so magnificent that it started to boast about itself instead of helping other civilizations and cities and countries around it, that eventually it tripped and destruction came its way, whether it was by their own hand or someone else's, who's to say? But I think that's something we need to take away from here. There's a reason Atlantis doesn't exist today. Why is it?
Well, and there is that quote that, of course, I don't know who said it, but those that do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We're seeing time and time again that history repeats itself. Not to the exact letter per se, but we are constantly repeating history because I'll just say the higher ups don't want to learn from history. Like Erik just mentioned, they're just worried about power. They don't care what happens. And that's pretty sad because we should be growing as a people, not declining.
Right. Not to make it all political.
No, I'm totally not. I'm just saying humanity as a whole, we're not learning from history.
No, for sure. But I think that takes us back to Atlantis because I think there's, again, there's so much speculation as to why it no longer exists, if it did exist. Like, why did it fall? Why was it? Like, everyone wants to say, oh, it was destroyed by this, that, or this. Like I said at the beginning of the show, if you were to abandon your house for a year, just leave it for a year. Don't come back. Don't check on it. Nothing. When you come back, I bet there's vines coming up out coming up the side of the house. You got trees growing and destroying the foundation. You probably have animals living inside of it. That's after a year, right? Probably looks completely different. So there's a good chance that whatever civilization existed in Atlantis, the Atlanteans, maybe weren't as powerful as they thought they did. And a rival came, destroyed and plunged the city. It became a ghost town, and the earth took back what it rightfully belongs to itself. Right? If there was no one there to tend it, maybe that's why Atlantis disappeared. Either the people there were destroyed, or they just simply left and they erased history themselves.
And we're going to make that your final thoughts.
That's fair.
I'm not going to even ask because I don't want to hear no but. Well, I hope you all have enjoyed this. Share your theories and thoughts with us, whether it's comments on wherever you're listening or watching on social media. Email us. We love to get emails from listeners. paratruthradio@gmail.com. Get on our website, paratruth.com. You can message us that way as well. Even leave us a voicemail if you like. And if you want us to play it on air to share your theory, we can do that, or we can just leave it for ourselves and be happy with that. Mm-hmm. Make sure you like, share, subscribe wherever you listen. Again, this has been a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and the United Public Radio Network. Make sure you check out all the great shows that we've got here, because we've got tons of them, and we got tons more joining constantly. But until next week, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.